You probably know the feeling where you're playing a solo and it sounds something like this. And it's fine, you're using the right notes, the right scale, a solid arpeggio, but it's still really boring. So what do you do about it? In this video, I'm going to cover a few different things that I use, that I mess around with to change things up a little bit in terms of using some more interesting arpeggios, some better melodies or some new rhythms. Hopefully this is going to give you some inspiration and some new things that you can start adding to your playing to change things up a little bit. My name is Larsen, learn jazz, make music. Very often solos will sound like you're playing either scales in a stepwise motion or arpeggios in third distance. If that's the case, then you are missing out a lot of interesting and very beautiful intervals. And when it comes to adding larger intervals to your solos, there are a lot of different ways you can do this. You can start using some more interesting interval structures like quartal harmony, or work with arpeggio inversions. And also, of course, work with octave displacement. But one that I really like to use is shell voicing arpeggios. And if you're improvising over a static G minor 7, like I'm working with here in this video, then you can already use shell voicings from the different chord tones and get something like this. So here I'm just playing a G minor shell voicing as an arpeggio, and then the B flat major 7. And then a D minor 7. Really just working with melodies that are based on the basic arpeggio and that also contain some larger intervals, because we have first a third and then a fifth interval. And while this already works quite well in the basic form, you can also turn it into a lick by using a pattern of that shell voicing to create a more interesting melody, and that could be something like this. Let's continue with a few more examples using different melodies and arpeggios, and then move on to some more interesting rhythms. Most solos consist of melodies that only have one direction and one layer. Of course, that makes sense. It is a single solo and you're thinking about a melody, but you can actually add several layers and also have different directions going at the same time. And that's something that's very efficient to change things up. And one easy way to do that is to work with pedal points, where you have one layer that's static and then you have another layer that's moving against it. In that way, creating the feeling of having two different layers instead of just being a scale run or just being an arpeggio. An easy way to get started with this is just to take a basic, pretty neutral chord tone and then use that as a pedal point and play a melody against it. And you can keep the melody pretty simple because the fact that you have the pedal point there is already making it interesting. This example is using the fifth as a pedal point, and as you can see, the melody that's moving against it is both above and below that pedal point. Both things will work. Of course, mostly you won't do both in the same example. That's just to illustrate how it works. And another thing you want to be aware of is that if you took away the pedal point, then the basic melody that's playing against it is really just very simple and very stepwise. If you're looking for more inspiration for new melodic ideas, then consider checking out my Instagram page, where I'm posting licks every Sunday, and the day after I'm analyzing those licks so you have an idea about how they're constructed and how the melodies are made. You can change up a solo by adding some chromatic passages to it, and I've covered a lot of stuff on chromatic enclosures and different kinds of passing notes. But another thing that works really well is to just shift an entire part of the melody, an entire structure out of the key and then back again. This example does this by shifting a D minor triad up to E flat minor and then back again, and it's kept kind of subtle because it's only 3 notes and I'm not playing the same direction. You can also sometimes be a little bit too obvious with shifting things out of the key and then back again, because you're just literally playing the same thing a half step up and then a half step down again. When I made this example, then I was thinking about moving the D minor triad up a half step and then down again. But the way it actually comes out in the line, you can also see it in a different way and analyze it as being half a bar of D7 that's just superimposed on top of the G minor, because then I'm using this, which is an inversion of a C half diminished arpeggio, a great choice for a D7 altered, and then I'm just resolving that back into G minor. Rhythm is also a really great way to change things up a bit, and it's also something that's often a little bit underdeveloped because we're too busy thinking about hitting the right notes and what scales to use and what arpeggios are available. A great example of using 3 8-note groupings is a line like this that you'll hear Wes Montgomery, Charlie Parker and Pat Martino use very often. And it's really pretty basic because we're just applying a rhythm to a descending arpeggio. And this is a great way to start. You can of course add this to your playing, but you can also make your own variation on it, like this. This variation is using the same basic rhythm, but I'm starting somewhere else and going on a little bit longer. Of course, the melody is still using the arpeggio, but just using another pattern. As sort of an extra effect, I'm also really emphasizing the 13 on the G minor 7, which is just a nice effect that you can use when you're playing on a static G minor chord. If you checked out any of the solos that I posted on Instagram or on YouTube where I'm improvising on a medium swing tempo, then you've probably heard me use triplets, so 8th note triplets in groups of 4, because that's something that I do really often. I'm a huge fan of Herbie Hancock and he does this a lot as well. The concept is actually pretty simple because you're improvising in 8th note triplets, but then instead of just playing the triplets, really emphasizing the beat that's happening in 4/4, you group them in 4-note groupings, and that gives you sort of a 6/4 feel on top of the original meter, and that gives it a polyrhythmic effect that's very nice to just change things up, make it a little bit unclear, but in a nice way. A short example of how you can do this would sound something like this. So here you can also clearly see that in the second bar where I'm playing the triplets, I'm very clearly making it 4-note groupings by playing descending arpeggio inversions. So, and then that is moving on top of the original meter and just adding a little bit of friction in a nice way. If you're looking for new material, some new melodies and some new structures that you can use in your solos, then triads is really something that's very useful to check out. There are a lot of triads that you can superimpose on chords. And in this video, I'm going over how to find triads, but also how you can use them. And that's really worthwhile because triads are one of the strongest melodies that you can find in jazz or in music in general. So you want to have that in your vocabulary.